Port. You've probably have never heard of the place. It's this little town in the middle of Saskatchewan, Canada, with a population just over 1,000 people. It's got a gas station, a little motel called the Pilgrim, a church, a few small schools, and yet it still boasts one of the premium hockey academies in Canada, Prairie Hockey Academy. What makes it special? It's not just the talent they produce, it's the character of the individuals that leave their program after they've been through it. In the next 2 episodes of the podcast, we're going to be talking with Justin Simpkins, who is the man with the vision and the mission, the founder of Prairie Hockey Academy. He did so in 2017 when I started TOC. All the way back then, I know Justin from my time in a group mentorship program with a mentor of ours named Jamie Gilbert. But today, Justin is not talking about that experience. He's talking about the Prairie Hockey Academy and how they have built this program on a countercultural idea, which is hockey is just a vehicle. The real goal is developing life champions, young men and women who know how to lead, serve, and grow. Now, in today's conversation, we're going to talk about his journey, his story with a leadership coach that changed everything, and what it's actually taken to build this program that puts character at the center. At the end of today's conversation, he's going to share with us the number one thing, the most important thing that they do with their program that makes them truly unique and transformational. Welcome back to the Coaching Culture Podcast, the podcast to help you become a better coach, a better leader, and build a better culture. Join our online community today for coaches by going to tocculture.com, where you can subscribe to our online courses, certifications, and live trainings. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Team Culture Toolbox, our weekly newsletter, to get the notes to this and every episode of the podcast with some great action items at the end of it. Justin, this is really cool to be able to bring this podcast together today because I don't know if you remember it, but one of the first guest episodes I ever recorded was with you and Shane Sowden. Never got released, probably for multiple reasons. I don't even remember what recording software we were on, but we're finally making it happen nearly, 9 years later at this point, right?
Yeah, I do remember that because we were shooting at like 5 a.m. in order to make all the time zones work. But yeah, this is a blast. Thanks a lot, JP and Nate for having me here today.
Oh no, I'm excited to have you, and I'm going to show for those that are watching. This is my Prairie Hockey Academy coffee mug. I drink coffee out of this mug. I don't remember which year you gave it to me. Probably about 2018, 2019. I got this coffee mug, and I've been drinking coffee out of it ever since. And one of the reasons I love this mug, is I like mugs, the thermal insulated mugs with a handle. But the other reason I love it is it has the mission of Prairie Hockey Academy, which you've started back in 2017 when I started Thrive On Challenge, which is now TOC. And your mission on the mug is using the power of hockey to develop life champions. And I can't tell you the amount of times where I've been walking around drinking coffee and people are like, what's that all about? So I'm going to ask you, what's that all about? Like, you got this mission, using the power of hockey to develop life champions. Where'd that come about for you?
It probably started for me in 2009. I was a mediocre hockey player with a bad attitude for a lot of years in my college career. I'll put it that way. And I ran into a leadership coach after my college career was over. And I was like, man, I just wish somebody would have had this information to me as a youngster, because it would have completely changed my trajectory. I truly believe that. And a lot of what he was teaching me was that we want to use the power, or through leadership training, we're developing what he called life champions. And the role of a life champion or a leader is so we're developing champions who develop champions. And it just stuck with me. I started a kids program. I said, we're going to use power of hockey, because I was a college hockey coach at the time. And I just wanted to get into kids' hands what I didn't have when I was younger. And it started in 2009 with like 7-year-old kids and older. And we just started using the power of hockey to develop life champions.
Yeah, you use that word power.
Yeah.
And I think when we think about that in sports, oftentimes it's force, it's speed. You think about, it's a powerful game. It's a very physical game, ice hockey. And we know that there's a power in it that we have as coaches that is often misused. Mm-hmm. It's misused in sports. And it seems to be more so in the sports that are very physical at times, ice hockey and American football. There's been a lot of scandal within ice hockey there. I know in Canada as of late, but you kind of in 2017 you started PHA because you wanted to flip that. You wanted to use the power for good, right?
Yeah, we did. Through that period of 2009 to 17, it was this growing awareness of that idea of that power in that coaching, that transformational, comparison. But more than that, it was actually teaching young men and young women that I was coaching about meekness and what meekness meant. And it wasn't weakness. It was actually learning to have power under control. And so as leaders, we have this opportunity that we get to be in a position of power, potentially. We get to be in a position of influence, and we get to use that to serve the people inside of our care. And at times, as we're serving, it's going to require great courage. And at times, it's going to require us to be powerful, or even, as I'm reminded of watching this young David or this David movie the other night with my kids at the home, it's required. David had to be violent at times to protect his sheep, right, in his flock. And so I just think there's this meekness about it that we're trying to teach our young athletes, that in leadership positions, in athletics, how do we learn how to lead well and to serve others?
The insight for me on that one is like this idea of power under control. And I think about demanding between demeaning, like the difference between those things.
Yeah.
And I think I just had an aha moment there for myself, was like the demand, what's the difference between demanding and demeaning is oftentimes, is it in their control? Like, are we using our control, our influence, our power, our influence in a way that we're controlled and intentional? Or are we just being reactionary, coaching from our personality or the way that we were coached, right?
For sure. So it all comes down to heart, right? And that intentionality of that heart. And if we haven't done any self-reflection to check our heart or win over that battle inside of it, then the meaning part's probably going to come out of us.
Justin, I'm guessing that this approach to building a hockey academy is somewhat unique in terms of its mission in the context of youth hockey in Canada and probably abroad. Certainly haven't heard the word meek, I don't think, JP, on the podcast since we've been doing this for 7-8 years together here. So I'm curious, as you're starting, you have this vision and you're going to start this hockey program, like, how do you sell something like that into a space where this for many might be a totally foreign concept?
It started as a kids program for a lot of years. It was just a volunteer-based piece that we grew, and we had we had over 100 children a part of it for the springs, that it grew to the point where people were sending their kids back to us going, my kid wants to quit hockey because he has such a terrible club season, but if you're running that spring program again, like, that's all he looks forward to. And I started to carry this burden a little bit of, like, it was my job to rebuild these young men up, to love the sport again, to have fun because it's a sport again, to learn because they're having fun, and then to become better leaders, and then try and send them back out to the wolves, I'd almost say at times. And not every program is a wolf, but for some of them, they were experiencing that. And then it got to the point where people started asking, could you do this all year long? And that's where we started to look into it in 2015. So there was a select group that wanted it, but as we expanded, it did become more difficult. I mean, we're in a very competitive league across Canada. It's truly across Canada. It's from the East Coast to the West Coast. So really from Nova Scotia to Victoria, BC on Vancouver Island. Travel is huge, and the competition and recruitment is big. We struggled in the first few years to recruit the top end athletes because people thought, maybe we were just too soft or we were just developing it. And then we started to see the fruit of that work and the fruit of building a culture where people wanted to be a part of it and people were loved and cared for who they were. And then we started to get reports from families that my kids are growing up and my kids are mature and they're leaders and they're cared for here. And then that ripple happens. And now we'll have 200 to 300 applicants for a team, especially in our under 18 division, before our season starts. Right. So it was tough at first, but I think there's a changing culture out there. I think people are recognizing that if their children are going to play in sports, they want to play for a leader that possesses character. and that can then use the sport to actually teach character, right?
You mentioned, going back to your comment about meekness being sort of power under control, and you talked there about the kind of program that a player wants to play in, and I would assume by extension that's also the kind of coach that once a player sort of experiences, they want to continue to play for, which maybe makes that contrast with what they go home to, before your resident program began. When you're staffing your program and you're looking for coaches, and maybe especially in those early years, are you looking for people that they already are exemplifying some of these characteristics, or are you looking for people that you can develop into coaches that players are going to really respond to, or is it a mix of both?
It's an area that I've greatly failed at. And why I say that is, when I originally started it, Nathan, it was like a volunteer. We're going to create this incredible culture, and I just believe that a coach was a coach, that X's and O's anybody could do, but to connect and truly transform an athlete, you just had to love them. And so I would approach guys. I remember one of my best coaches earlier on was a young man named Jason Mueller, who played university football in Canada, coached high school basketball in Canada. And I said, Jay, why don't you come coach hockey? And he's like, it's like, hey, a coach is a coach, Jay. You played intramural hockey in college. You can do this. And he was one of the best I had. We start an academy, and you're now charging a fee to play, and parents are expecting quite a bit. And you start searching for coaches with credentials, and coaches with experience, and coaches that play professionally, and coaches that have coached professionally. And they come in with these predetermined mindsets and that, and then you're trying to think, oh, by the way, here we're going to coach like this, and you start to run into some friction. And I think that's where one of the biggest pieces where I transitioned from actually coaching inside of it to trying to bring in coaches was actually a challenge, Nate. And so it's a great question, because I lost sight of that vision a little bit. And now we're transitioning a little bit to where we're just starting to bring back coaches. Actually, at the moment, we have coaches that played for us in like 2017, our first year. They've come back and now they're coaching. And I'm finding, working with them, just their heart and their mindset of what they're here for is so much different than somebody that's using us, using our program as a quick, maybe jumping board to the next level, right?
That's a tough one, right? So you're talking about there, just so I make sure I heard you right. Initially, it was just like, a coach is a coach. Let's just come somebody that wants to coach the right way, the PHA way, this way that's fully aligned with this mission and our vision, our values. And then you start chasing talent. I'm going to put that in air quotes, talented coaches, popularity. And you start to sacrifice people that maybe are committed to that mission and are committed to their own growth as a leader. It's kind of interesting. So other backstory for our listeners, how we actually know each other. I mean, you met so many years ago, was I was going through a massive transformation in my journey. I read the book Burn Your Goals by Joshua Medcalf and Jamie Gilbert. And then I reached out to Jamie Gilbert and started working with him in a group mentorship program. And you were the other person in the group along, I think there's another fellow in there as well too, but we stayed connected through that. And it's kind of interesting that, we initially I was a far from perfect coach, as you know, but we were committed to learning and growing for our players and becoming more transformational in our approach. And I think that's what naturally brought us together. Finding coaches like that are really, really, truly committed to intentionality and coaching from their values. It's tough work, though.
It is tough work. And it has to be, you have to find the coach that's committed to it, like you said, and is intentional to it. And then it's easy to come in and mold them, right? That idea of, that whole idea of the growth mindset piece, I think is what just comes to mind for me. It's, I wrote this, it's like this idea that the belief that you're never done becoming who you're meant to be. I think that's in essence what a growth mindset has to have in it, right? We want to bring somebody in that wants to grow and wants to learn, that wants to look at it a little differently and wants to develop champions, life champions, right? Young men.
Yeah, so it's not about finding the perfect coach, but it's just finding people that really want to do the work to grow into that that coach that they can be, they have the potential to be. When you think about what PHA does so well from a system standpoint, we've talked about the mission, building life champions, looks great on this coffee mug, looks great on the walls of your locker room. But what does it actually look like when we start to operationalize those values and that mission within how you run your program that makes it different than anybody else?
In what you're investing in, I think is the big piece for me is we, because this is what matters to us. We spend a lot of money on character formation, on time, time built into mentorship programming and really, I would say one-on-one, but we do two-on-one, coaches with an athlete and player development plans. And, we have a full-time director of player development at Prairie Hockey Academy. And when I say, actually, we call him director of team development, sorry, not player development, but he's full-time, but he actually came in as a master's in leadership. He's been a chaplain, he's been a pastor, but our goal was just to have an individual who oozes character that can meet one-on-one, that can be there to support the coaches as they develop young men. That when we have 80 teenagers together out, under heaven, that guess what teenagers do? They're professional mistake makers. That's how they learn. They wake up every day and they're like, hey, what can I do today that I can learn from? What kind of mistake can I make today? I mean, it's children and teenagers. And so it's just, how do we come alongside of them and support them and advocate for them and help them grow through that? And so that's why we put those positions in place, as opposed to just a strength and conditioning coach or a power skating coach or a shooting coach we've really chosen to invest in soft skill development programs, also, which cost money, but it's an investment that we feel like returns in the livelihood of these young men and their future.
I'm curious, Justin, what has been the most significant difference that you've seen? I'm assuming we're talking about Kevin here, our friend from the ocean. Since you brought Kevin on board, what difference has that investment made?
I go through a lot more Tylenol now. He gives me a headache most days. But no, I think the most significant investment is, I think the families and the athletes feel supported, in the sense of, I know that every coach will talk about an open door and we work as coaches to try and create player development plans. But when you're in a program like an academy model where it's 10 months long and it's every single day for 10 months, as opposed to the odd Sunday, but sometimes it's the Sundays because we're traveling, we're playing. Having a third party and an individual that can fill a chaplaincy role and a mental performance and a leadership coach that you can just really come to, and have there to be in your corner and to have there to challenge you. I think we just see that growth happening further for these individuals, because sometimes they might come with an issue and it's like, hey, well, have you talked to your coach yet? No, okay, you haven't. Remember that as we mature as young men, we have to recognize that part of being a leader is taking responsibility. So you need to go and do this. And it's just that constant reminder and that individual in their corner. So that's been the most significant for me, is just seeing we're not without young men making mistakes or challenges, but we're there with a lot more support around them now. And therefore their maturity and their growth can happen quicker. I think would be the best way to put it.
What I really appreciate you just shared there, when you talk about player development plans, your coaches are full-time coaches. They're sitting down, they're mapping out with the athletes their path forward to not just becoming the best hockey player, but the best man they can be. You've got these character sessions, which you do on, I think, still on Wednesdays, right? Where
every Wednesday
you have the team in there and you're unpacking things around character, leadership, mental performance. So you're making the time, you're investing the money in these resources, and yet there's still things that you do that are different, that don't take any time. It's just you're doing things differently than other programs out there. Could you speak a little bit to that? Like, what did you think about our way? And maybe we're not perfect on it at PHA, but that this is our way of doing things when it comes to disciplining, how we approach student athletes with grace, because we know that they're going to make mistakes. Just what are you doing that's differently in the day-to-day ways of coaching and leading these young men that is so vastly different than others out there?
Yeah, and I want to say one piece. You talked about player development plans too, and I think it's really easy to see when we start to something kind of creeps up inside of a team, and I'm able to connect with a coach and just hey, where are your player development plans at? Because as soon as wins and losses become the focus, I think it's because we've lost track of the development conversation. And so we're able to really quickly revisit that again and recognize maybe we're behind a couple of weeks on those, and we start having those conversations again, and it just seems like things realign, right? So it's just a communication and clarity gap in oftentimes. So as much as we're doing it, we're never perfect. What are we doing outside that makes us different too? It comes down a lot to, I honestly want to say, the conversations that we have around our coaching rooms helps us with our heart posture when it comes to seeing the athletes when they arrive every day. And so if we keep our conversations above the line as coaches, and we're in the midst of having a growth mindset, and we're not complaining about athletes, but we're finding ways to connect with them when maybe there's challenges happening, and we're able to, as a group, work with each other on that as a group of staff, I feel like that creates that environment where, again, the heart posture is in the right spot, that when we connect with them, we can actually see them as people and not just for their performance. And I say the heart posture because I think this is such a battle so often of our heart as coaches. So when it comes to whether it's the demanding or the demeaning conversation, different pieces like that. So I think that's a big piece, JP, and maybe there's some more specific outside of that, but it's, as much as we do Wednesdays and on a Wednesday class, we re-rotate it monthly. So first, second, third, fourth Wednesday, they get different pieces each of those Wednesdays. That's fine. But there's more than that. There's small groups that happen on Tuesdays that we jump into, and there's small group conversations and discussions going on. But when we meet them, outside of player development time, just when we meet them in the hallway, we've talked about that whole Ritz-Carlton principle of the 1, 3, and 5, and just how do we greet our athletes? How do we greet other people? How do we create an environment where our athletes are loved and cared for who they are and not what they do? And I think it's a big piece that we talk about a lot, is creating that. There's enough spaces out there that are only going to judge us based on our performance. And so we've just, I don't know, been really intentional about not being that spot. And
What are you most proud of when you've started in 2017, so you're closing in on 10 years here? What are you most proud of that you and many of the staff that have been there like from the beginning that you have kind of created within the program?
I am that 10 years later, basically, essentially we're in our 9th season, but when we started 2017, I just said I wanted us to be recognized as the premier place in Canada to send your son or daughter for character development and skill development, that we were going to be known as the place that could do that. So that was kind of a preliminary vision at that point in time. Our vision's changed a little bit now, but we're becoming known that. There was a fairly well-known name in the hockey world here in Canada last year that at our playoffs ran into a couple parents and just told them that they found out they were from Prairie Hockey Academy. And he said, hands down, the best academy in Canada. I cannot believe the development happening from Prairie Hockey Academy. That was a huge compliment. I felt pretty honored to hear it, and it's really neat to see it. So I'm just really proud of our staff making a choice to love kids where they are and to develop them as they are. But just recognizing that when mistakes happen, mistakes are mistakes. We're developing young men. It's all part of the process. And we're just we're hearing that comment made out in the marketplace now, that people are recognizing that if they want to send their child away to be cared for and to grow in their hockey development side, that Prairie Hockey Academy is the best spot to do. And that's cool. Really cool.
You're involved in other teams, like your kids' teams. You see other coaches out there. You see other programs. When you think about the advice that you might give anybody else running another organization, whether it's a high school athletic director
Yeah.
or, a club director, what have you learned through this experience of running PHA, that might serve them? If you could just give them one really important piece of advice to help them be more mission driven while also being, in in the words of many out there, the premier spot for development, right?
I mean, like John O'Sullivan's title of his book, Every Moment Matters. I just think that like every detail matters too. And so when I say that, when you come to Prairie Hockey Academy and you step into our, we call it the Champions Hall. It's 4,000 square feet. It's beautiful and it's pristine. And when it's not, we're below the line, because we have really high standards for our athletes and we need to hold them for ourselves also. So if I'm talking to somebody else, I'm like, know your why. And if you haven't, we talk about the Joe Ehrman book, with Inside Out Coaching and being able to answer, why and et cetera. So it's like, know your why, answer those 4 questions first, and then get into it. And then recognize that every detail matters, that how you show up every day determines how your athletes are going to show up every day, and be intentional with it. So if you have a strong why in place and you love the kids, then the rest of it should be taken care of.
Justin, I'm curious from an athlete perspective, what do you think has been maybe one of the top 1 or 2 challenges that athletes have in acclimating themselves to the PHA way, because it is so different and the expectations go well beyond what they're doing on the ice? Do you find that there's some common, adjustments, or there's some challenges that they need to work their way through as they're acclimating to the program?
Working through it right now with a few young men. They thought they were recruited here just to play hockey, and that they've got this career pathway to the NHL, and that they're just here to, for the boys and to win a championship. And without sounding like a Mr. Miyagi here a little bit, it's like, no, you're wrong. Actually, it's like, that's not what this is about at all. In fact, C.S. Lewis puts it really well. And it's like, if we put first things first in our life, second things don't become suppressed. In fact, they can become greater. And so let's talk about first things first. We're education-based hockey players. So school and character formation. And if we look after those things, hockey will be really well taken care of, and we'll make sure it's there. So I think that's a big piece of acclimating here, is that they come from somewhere. Maybe it's a club, it's a AAA program, it's a travel team, it's a tier 1 USHL program. And it's all about hockey, and they've been told that they're really good, and they've been drafted to the next level, and their scouts told them go here and develop, and they think they're just here for hockey. And then I think it hits a little bit on that there's a lot more going on here than just hockey. And it's not just about you and the boys. It's actually about, how are you developing as a young man? How are you showing up every day in class? How are you showing up to serve your teammates? Things like that. And when hockey all of a sudden starts to not go their way, it gets challenging. And that's when we get to have these conversations again.
Like what you just shared there a second ago really actually kind of hit me, because, here you've got guys that are potential NHL players someday. And I look around the athletic landscape, and, not everybody knows this, but I actually don't really watch sports. most sports, having a sports podcast and all that, I didn't watch any of the NFL, Super Bowl. I kind of stay away from it, because for me, and I'm not saying this to say that people shouldn't, but there's so much uneasiness around this. Mm-hmm. I've been inside the locker rooms of, big time programs, and I've seen all the things that they give these athletes and they use to entice these athletes to come in there so that they can use these athletes to make money. And it becomes so transactional that it really becomes difficult for me to kind of just really enjoy sports. But yet, this is why, my favorite jacket and my favorite mug is my PHA jacket and my PHA mug. And today is because you have great power in the fact that you're able to bring in these top level athletes here from across Canada. And yet you just continuously work never perfect about it, but you're working day in and day out to put the first things first and to not use these athletes. And I don't know if there's a question in here other than just me wanting to speak out, like how special and powerful that is in today's sporting world.
Yeah, I appreciate that, JP. It's it has a lot of power, and that's why we're saying, like, if we can use the power of hockey, that sport, if we can use the power of sport, and a lot of organizations are doing this in really good intended ways, through even like, I know that JP, you were a part of a group that went down and did some mission work and stuff too, and through the power of sport, they'd use that. And if we can use the power of sport to really connect with individuals and then help them develop to be leaders of the next generation, that's what wakes me up every day. And it really came originally in like 2009 or 10 when Joe Ehrman wrote that book, because it was just like, sport should develop character, but it doesn't. It's like the greatest myth out there. In fact, oftentimes it develops all the opposite things that we're looking for. And so we got to be intentional. And if we are, then man, is it powerful. And it's so good, and it can teach so many really cool teamwork principles and discipline and just character and empathy for others. And it's really great.
All right, that's it for part 1 with Justin. What did I learn or relearn from this conversation? First, the difference between demanding and meaning. I love this bit. It's heart posture. Kids will sense our heart, and that will influence how they interpret our behavior. Hugely important there. Never had thought of it that way. Don't hire for credentials. Just get great people who will have a heart for people and a desire to learn and grow. I wrote that one down. And then I know this from my experience of visiting them, but the values are things that you don't just put on a wall. You need to bring your values into everything, not just your gear, not just the walls. You got to bring it to everything you do. Now, we didn't talk about this, but we probably should have. But I was thinking about their values, and one of the cool things that they do is at the end of the year, they have an award ceremony for all their players. And this is one of my favorite things that they do. They have their core values award: grace, respect, integrity, and toughness. And rather than just, a coach giving those out, they actually have young men, players within the academy, giving out these awards to each other and giving speeches around them. Super, super impactful, transformational. And it's just a really cool way to display the character and the growth of the young men that they are helping to grow. Lastly, he mentioned it there, but just the secret sauce is love. And I don't think we use that word enough within teams. I think people are afraid of it. We don't want to make people uncomfortable. But I'm starting to feel a little bit like Justin, which is I'm going to be more comfortable making people uncomfortable. I'm going to use that word a lot more often today. So let's talk about love a lot more with our athletes and with our teams. That's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it. Also, please leave us a 5-star review if you haven't, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next episode or any other future episodes of the Coaching Culture Podcast.